right, so this week we will be dissecting frogs. And so you'll notice on this specimen a few things. First of all, they have the dye injected, so we should be able to see their circulatory systems a little bit better. You can see where they've injected the vein there. From the top of the frog, you can easily see the eyes. You can see the nostrils. You can see where the mouth is. Now we're gonna flip this frog over, and we're gonna look at the exterior. Again, you can see where they've put some dye in with the injection. One thing to notice is that frogs only have a single urogenital opening. Well, take a look at this real quick. This is called the cloaca. We're gonna talk about it. It's where the eggs, the anus, the urine, everything come out. Cloaca actually means, I'm spacing on it, what the word means. The word cloaca, hold on, I'm trying to find it. No, but there was a, yeah, sorry, Ava was pointing something out. Cloaca actually means sewer. So when we talk about birds, we talk about amphibians, we talk about reptiles, we are talking about a single opening called the cloaca, where the separate systems, the urinary system, the digestive system, and the reproductive systems have separate kind of pathways inside, but there's only one opening that leads to out of the body. All right, so what we've done first is we've just cut the loose flaps of skin off. To really get inside this thing, we're going to have to lift up with our forceps to get these abdominal muscles. Probably easier to go where it's already split, Ava. And we're going to have to cut these abdominal muscles away from the rest of the abdominal cavity. All right, so as we're looking inside this frog, one thing that some frogs have that these frogs don't really show a lot of are fat bodies. The fat bodies would be spaghetti-shaped structures that are bright orange or bright yellow. These frogs are relatively thin, so we don't have the fat bodies, but they're usually located just inside the abdominal wall. The other thing here that we're starting to work away is called the peritoneum. This is this thin, kind of almost web-like structure that surrounds the abdominal cavity, and we've got to gently work away that from each of the organs so that we are able to isolate them. But two organs that we're going to point out right now before we work on the peritoneum. The largest structure within the frog's abdominal cavity is the liver. Here you see it. The liver has 3 lobes. The right lobe, the left anterior, that's the right lobe. This is the left posterior lobe, and under the left posterior lobe is the left anterior lobe. And then we also want to point out the heart. In this particular case, because we've had the dye injected into the frog so that the arteries are dyed red and the veins are dyed blue, the heart has taken on a blue structure. It wouldn't really be blue in like a fresh frog that you caught and cut open. It's just part of that dye procedure. All right, so we're going to point out, Xander, hush please. We're going to point out some of these organs before we start cutting some out and isolating other systems. So we've got our liver here. We've also got our intestines that you can see. This thing behind the liver here is the stomach. We're going to cut that out in a moment and look inside and see if we can figure out what our frog last ate. You can see the heart here. And then you see these 2 blue sacs. These are our lungs. Well, that's all that we're able to see right now. I'm just going to review these internal organs before we start to isolate some of, we're going to cut out like the liver and the stomach here in a few minutes and start to get at some of the other systems. So here we've got the liver, we've got intestines attached to the liver, we've got, if we lift up the liver, we've got the stomach behind the liver right there. Right above the liver, we have our heart. We'll talk more about the heart in a few minutes. And then these blue sacs on either side of the abdominal cavity are the lungs. All right, so here we've got Eric's frog, who apparently was an alcoholic. So I don't know if you guys can tell, but the one Eric is doing, this is the liver. This thing is massive and is rock solid. So maybe he's got, cirrhosis of the liver. It's kind of hard for us to see anything else on Eric's frog. So our first step for Eric's frog is going to be removing that monstrous liver. Most frogs don't have livers this large. All right, so here I've cut out the liver. We can see the kind of crescent-shaped stomach that was under the liver, and I just wanted to point out the system of intestines here. So we've got, starting with the small intestine, and then here you can see where it gets thicker, that becomes the large intestine. I also just want you to see this lovely vascularization. So these frogs have been double dyed, which means that their arteries have had a red dye injected in them, and their veins have had a blue dye injected in them. And so throughout the abdominal cavity, we've got this fully closed circulatory system, right? We've got these beautiful arteries and veins that run to all of the organs. All right, so looking here at the heart, this blue structure right here, one thing that I want you to notice is that as you look coming out at the top of the heart, Ava, that's going to be that big artery right there, we have something called the conus arteriosus. This is kind of like equivalent to what is our aorta. All right, so looking here at the heart, we can actually see the three chambers of it. We have our left and our right atrium, and we have this single ventricle at the bottom. Okay, looking here at the lungs, which we're going to cut out next, you see that they're both dyed blue. That's because of course, the dye for the circulatory system. These are rather hard and spongy organs. So they're not quite the same as the sacs that we see in like mammals. We were watching the new Gordon Ramsay Uncharted show on Disney Plus, and they had, what was it that he had killed? It had been a seal. Yeah, he'd been up with the Flint in Alaska and had to inflate the seal lungs, and they were much, much more like balloons. The reason these aren't like balloons is because amphibians are absorbing gases in a kind of a watery environment. So, I mean, they do have to be able to breathe, yes, but they're also absorbing gases through the skin, and so their lungs are much more spongy versus being air-filled sacs. So we've now cut out the stomach. If you were to look way up there, we could manhandle our frog and get to the point where we could see the esophagus, but just like our esophagus connects to our stomach, so too does the frog's esophagus connect to its stomach. So we've got the stomach removed right here. We've already cut the intestines out. We're going to get ready and cut open the stomach and see if we can determine what the last meal of this frog was. We are trying to get his lungs out to be able to look at things. One thing this did show, though, is the spleen. Do you see that reddish body right there? That is the frog's spleen. We actually couldn't find that in Ava's frog. So maybe that large liver serves a function? I don't know. All right, so here we've got our stomach. We've cut it open to see if we could distinguish any stomach contents. We can't. There isn't enough detail there, but this stomach is pretty heavily vascularized. That allows the blood to come in contact with the nutrients that the digestive enzymes are allowing to come out of the food. It's also pretty muscular, so your stomach can kind of churn and move food through its passageway on into the intestines. All right, so we're now going to look at the urogenital system. Okay, so we have a male frog here. These are the testes. These things that look like little beans are responsible for producing millions of sperm. Kind of on the back near the spine, we've got these dark red structures. These are the kidneys. So terrestrial animals have to be able to excrete both liquid waste and solid waste. So amphibians, even though they spend much of their time in water, they do have kidneys to kind of filter out that liquid waste. So again, kidneys and testes. Unfortunately, none of the 4 frogs that we brought home to work on were female, so I am unable to show you what the egg sacs would look like. All right, so here we've got the area where we would expect to find the bladder, where it would be able to fill up with urine before the urine leaves the body. We have here a little seminal vesicle. This is one of the tubes that brings sperm to the cloaca. And then it's really kind of hard to get into because it's really kind of tight and hard, but we've got the cloaca itself. So the excretory system, the digestive system, and the reproductive system all empty out into this area down here called the cloaca, and then that cloaca exits the body.